have a very special guest tonight, smAsho.
And thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, please.
I'm recording from my end too. We're gonna put a video up on our channel. I guess you're recording too. Cheers.
So what we have tonight is smAsho, who, by the way, has a quite offensive name. His name is Daniel Nigro, which has nothing to do with blackface and everything to do with it.
And thank you for pronouncing it correctly, by the way.
smAsho, you can find him over at YouTube here. He has actually blown up. He's 1.15K subscribers. Tonight we're going to get him over 2,000. Unless you guys, schmuck it up. And you can also hear his weird echo in the background that's totally tripping us out. He's also the owner of smAsho.com, and we're showing you that now. Welcome to the Neo Resistance, and let me tell you my honest opinion.
The Neo Renaissance.
smAsho has been following us for maybe 2 years.
Something like that, yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I thought smAsho was just an idiot. He's a schmuck 'em up, and he can suck it. But then I learned about Professor Dave Explains, and then I actually met smAsh, and I was like, wow, 1.5 thousand subscribers does not compare to 1 million subscribers over at this schmuck site. So sheep are over here at his site, and look at smAsh. If we can get just half of those 775,000 schmucks over here, they could actually learn something. How the heck are you, Dan?
Good, man. How you doing?
We're about to expose some crazy stuff. Excellent. We're about to share some details about your past, and you have to explain it right now before we go further.
Yeah. Whatever you want to know, man.
We're here at a GoFundMe site where you're almost naked in some kind of a spacesuit, and it says smAsho, a.k.a. Dan, returns to the...
to the Peloton?
Yeah, the Peloton.
Is that even still active? I didn't even know that was a thing anymore. I don't even know if that's still legit.
I Googled it, so whatever.
Oh, wow, okay.
I can still donate. Now, let me tell you what's going on. No one cared except Terrence Leonard. Who's that?
No, a couple people cared. We got enough money to purchase one tire for that bike, and we did indeed use that tire until it got destroyed. Actually, I think it might still be on the bike. So, yeah, thanks to everybody who did donate to that GoFundMe.
Why are you scared of Terrence Leonard?
Oh, I'm not scared of Terrence Leonard. Terrence Leonard's fantastic. He sent us a bunch of coffee, and he was actually involved in our getting out of a French press. So, Terrence was one of the people who, when articles came out about how you should get the homocysteine out of your coffee by using a filter instead of using a French press to make it, we had to adapt once again and not be ossified in our coffee making.
This is so weird. Let's talk about the homocysteine.
Okay, yeah, let's. I don't know too much about it except that you shouldn't have hardly any if possible. It's super bad for you. It's not just bad, it's very bad.
Well, look, because Lee and I are all crazy about French press and a pour over, and I just sent her some information on the homocysteine, and she's like, oh my God, because we're trying to have a baby, and there's a million things to worry about, and now here's another thing. So, like, if you do not use an actual coffee filter, you're going to result in not capturing a certain type of oil, and it's going to actually be not beneficial to life. So we go from coffee's bad to coffee's good to coffee's bad, and now you have a specific way to do coffee. I mean, it's a schmoffy. And moreover, your feedback is completely annoying, by the way.
I apologize, but from your end, it depends on how you're recording. So I'm not wearing a headset. So your voice is recording to the mic. We're not currently using the computer. We're doing this kind of guerrilla style as if we were doing a live stream. So One of the things that we recently changed in the past around 2 years was switching to organic coffee, because coffee is the most heavily sprayed, or at least among the most heavily
Oh,
sprayed crops in the world in terms of pesticides,
but
fungicides, herbicides.
shut up. Let me break in. If anyone's done enough research on coffee, it's Leah and I. And it doesn't matter organic, GMO free, non organic. The only thing you have to worry about in the coffee industry, if you care about, is decaf. Do you know about the decaf insanity?
No, I don't know about the decaf insanity. Tell me. That sounds interesting.
All coffee, no matter if it's fair trade or free range or whatever you want to call it, is going to be contaminated with glyphosate because it all runs in the same consumer train. So what they found, even with the Clean 15 annual for the last decade, is that the same fruits and vegetables that go up the conventional train, quote unquote, they're moving these products to the shipping containers, is contaminated with these pesticides. So that when you lay on the organic version, the same crops are going to be contaminated with the same pesticides. And even though the contamination is much less in the organics, who cares? Let's say I'm looking at like 1,000 parts per billion on the traditional version versus 12 parts per billion on my version. I don't want any parts per billion on my version. So what we were cleaning in modern times is that if you're not growing your own food and you think that if you pay twice as much for this one, you're going to be safer, you can kiss my slave. That's a word I just invented just for fun. Because it doesn't matter. It's just your exposure time. So I don't even know where we're going with this whole argument. But if you're not growing your own food and producing your own products, it doesn't matter. It's all contaminated. Stop eating the contaminated food. Period.
And filter your coffee, because otherwise it's going to have homocysteine in it. And listen, we have two French presses. The cycling community is huge on French presses. They're very, you travel with them. It's great. It's so convenient. You just pour boiling water over the coffee. It's just great, except you should filter it. And then that led us down a
So
rabbit hole of what kind of filters to use. And I would get the homocysteine out of my coffee if I were you. It's associated with all
if
kinds of inflammatory disorders, literally all of them.
it's not the inflammatory disorders that's the most disturbing with the homocysteine. If you don't use an undyed brown paper,
Right.
bleach-free product,
And that's what I was talking about.
and that's going to capture most of the oils. What you're really looking for and looking forward to is a stroke. So it's not really the rheumatoid arthritis or the lasting effects of drinking that unfiltered coffee through the paper. It's instantaneous death. That's the biggest worry.
Yeah,
Because
homocysteine.
the biggest problem, yeah, of ingesting the homocysteine, if you're not someone like Leah and I who eat huge amounts of leafy greens grown organically that have no spray, I mean, we have such nutrient density that we really don't have to worry about any of these problems. But people that eat like fast food or live in any city, this is most of the population, that have a slightly comprised diet with not the correct micronutrients, if they're drinking coffee from a French press or a pour over version that goes directly, not through paper, you need that dark paper to suck up these cysteine oils. You're going to be at a higher risk for instantaneous stroke at a young age.
Not only
Some people,
stroke,
ages
but
20 to 40,
not only
they're
stroke, Diamond.
stroking out from this. Uh,
It's not only stroke. You're at a higher risk to practically everything. Anything, most cardiovascular disease is exacerbated by inflammatory body responses, and this straight up just causes inflammatory body responses. It causes a systemic
respect it.
inflammation. It's associated with so many different coronary artery disease. It makes your atherosclerosis worse if you have it. It makes your arteriosclerosis worse if you have that. These are all massive multiplicative risk factors for all inflammatory diseases.
This is definitely something that people are definitely dying out from the COVID-19. Now, here's what I
Yeah.
need from you, smAsh. I need to see you. You're not on my screen, bro.
Well, I can't show you I can't show the screen while recording
Oh,
the
there
way
you
I have the
That's
screen.
fine. There he is. That's fine. That's perfect. There you are. So there's smAsh there in his hat. So smAsh helmet. We've now really barely uncovered anything. We just got the coffee for sake.
All right,
So
so
let's
let's.
talk about the COVID. Let's get the coffee. Can we get
All
there?
right.
There you are.
Right. So yeah, let's now my recording is going to have my head real huge on the screen now. Let me blow you up as big as possible so it looks like we're butting heads.
Now,
Butting
before
heads.
we get the COVID, you know this guy. Let me talk about this guy. Now, Lee and I have had a problem. We recently were discussing. I called out Ice Age Farmer on some stuff he said, and I might have approached that in the wrong way, and I agree with her.
Okay.
And I'd love to agree to disagree, but there's certain things that you do in the course of your life that you regret. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
But
That doesn't necessarily mean
I
you shouldn't have done them,
definitely,
though. You know what I mean? Like, you may regret them, but that doesn't mean that they were wrong to do at the time. You may get new information that makes you go, oh, I wouldn't have done that had I known this. And, you can't necessarily. I've run into a lot of
yeah,
problems
yeah.
second guessing myself throughout the years, whether it comes to bike racing or various other things in life. I've second guessed myself a lot of times, and I'm usually incorrect when I second guess myself.
Well, and it doesn't matter because if you have the balls to accept the fact that you were wrong and move forward, well, then you're the bigger man all the time, every time.
I see no choice unless I have
And
no ethics. You either have ethics and you do that, or you have
okay,
none and you do something besides that. Those are your choices.
okay. So let's talk about the lack of ethics right now.
Yeah,
Now,
please.
I've been on the blogosphere for a while. I've been on YouTube and the internet, and I've been researching for quite some time on various topics. And I've never encountered this guy, Professor Dave Explains.
Okay.
And then somehow I got there because he just tried to debunk the electric universe. Now, you and I have been talking about all of the problems with the EU. Now,
Yeah.
there's some of them that are good. Some of the EU revelations are great, and the way that they've gotten hundreds of thousands of people involved in uh, the revelations of Anthony Peratt, Plasma Universe, petroglyphs, all 100. I mean, I can't say enough for that. But at the same time, the people that have supported them and they've invited onto their platforms, like Dr. Robitaille and Eugene Bagashov, which are uh, colleagues of mine. I can consider them colleagues, um, especially Eugene. I've met him in person, and so we all have differing opinions, and EU knows this more than many. But the point I'm making here is that we are coming to a precipice where Scientology and science are hitting a forefront. And
Indeed.
those that know what science is all about, hypothesis, experimentation, discovery, observation, and repeat in a circle, that's a real scientist. And you're trying to get to the bottom of things by repeating and rehashing and then resourcing. And my mentors put this into my core. If you're not doing direct observational science where you can rehash your hypothesis in time, then you're not doing any science. You're just holding on to a paradigm, a dogma, and
Agreed.
you're not doing anything. So I was a doer, and that's what I was taught to do. But then I come over and I find this guy, Professor Dave Explains, and he's a rehasher, and he's
Mm-hmm.
just my asher.
Yeah,
I even asked him to come on the show tonight, and I don't think he'll ever even respond to my email. But he almost has 1 million subscribers, and
does he have that
in his
many?
debunking it, yeah, and his debunking video of the electric universe, he basically just reads from current textbooks which are 100% dogma. He's like, comets are icy balls. Uh, Solar systems are accretionary disks, and we know that stars are nuclear factories that are burning themselves to supernova.
Yeah. So
And then when you
let's bring
so
up just
can you break that down? How pathetic that whole scenario is?
well. Let me just bring up one of the most recent articles. That's not a sharticle. It's about the fact that we see we see an impossibility to create gravitational accretion in a laboratory. So when we look at a laboratory setting in space in microgravity, we can't seem to get things to gravitationally accrete. Um,
No.
However, just in the past year or so, there have been some experiments showing that glass beads have started to accrete because of polarization. So again, while I'll yell from the rooftops all day that the universe and stars are not fundamentally electric, there are electric forces that are completely not understood in cosmology. So there are repulsive forces in
Hey,
cosmology as well as attractive ones, and gravity isn't the only thing
hey,
out there.
Daniel,
Yes.
a paper just came out this week, and I just was perusing it about ferroelectromagnetism at the atomic scale that's happening instantaneously
Well,
within the crystal lattice. So what we have is these. So remember when I told you that I thought that suns were ferrites?
yeah. Yep.
So what you have is this type of superconductive iron, and what Robitaille thinks it's liquid metallic hydrogen, correct?
Correct.
All right, so the paper coming out that I just read is showing that at the atomic level, these ferrites can instantaneously create their own electricity. Now, how duh? Now, I mean, duh, if you get a bunch of iron lined up in a lattice, why? That's what we're doing when we're wrapping copper wire around a tube, right? We're creating a structure that can create electricity instantaneously.
Yeah, and
So,
to be clear, that what if you say something is electric, there has to be a flow of electrons there. And I think one of the major problems that your basic physics high school physics teacher and your NASA cosmologist and your you know backyard astronomer, part of the problem that people are having here is just literally just the term electric. It's a problem because people will say, look, the reason that you don't fall through the floor, the atoms in your feet and the atoms and molecules in the floor are both primarily empty space, and the reason you don't fall through the floor is because of electronic repulsion, and that does not make the interaction between you and the floor electric. And I think there's a lot of people who are total science nabs who haven't taken a single physics class ever in their entire lives, and you get into these arguments
wow.
that people are like, everything's electric, everything's connected, and it's like, well, kind of, but not. It's not the way you think it is, and stars aren't fundamentally electric. Things like
No,
the best argument is the emission spectra. I mean, but there's Robitaille's 40 proofs. You've got the continuous light emission spectra is something really obvious. You could show somebody what a neon light looks like, where there's a very specific emission spectra. which is the kind of emission spectra you get from a gaseous plasma. Or you could show them the sun, just have them go outside at noon, and then they'll see this really bright object that's all white, and it's got a very
Smash.
continuous emission
Smash.
spectra, which cannot be emitted by a gaseous plasma.
Smash.
Yes.
Look, the people listening tonight, you lost them. I mean, you and I could talk about this. So, look, we're deep into this podcast. Can you break it down in layman's terms what's going on in 10 minutes?
Yeah, so basically, here's the way cosmology works. The field of cosmology is completely based on what we call classical astronomy, and without even referencing things like the Big Bang. Classic cosmology, if you take an astronomy class, you're going to learn that the sun has a fusion dynamo inside there, and it's fusing helium together, and that's the entire cause of the way the sun works. And we can calculate the mass of a star in a distant galaxy or in our own galaxy based on that model, right? Well, there are different models out there to how a star emits light the way it does. Stars are kind of out there jumping up and down saying, hey, look at us. We're emitting all this light. Try to understand how we work. And I think the biggest problem in all of cosmology is not understanding how the sun works at all, or what the sun's made of at all, and assuming that these theories that came out in the 1800s are still valid despite all kinds of observations indicating that they're incorrect. So when we extrapolate how the sun would do what it's doing currently to behave like it does, including a nuclear fusion dynamo, and we want to know what's going on in the core of this galaxy, and we're zooming in on M87 right here, radio images of a deep zoom in on M87's jets. The reason that people think that they know what the mass of that object is because they assume that this object is the same as the sun. And the problem is that none of these objects can do what they do if what we call the standard astronomy model, where you have these fusion dynamos inside of stars, and then you have second generation stars when they're more massive and they fuse different metals, different heavier elements besides hydrogen and helium together until you get to iron, and then they explode in supernovae, and then those stars die and other stars are born. The fact is, we haven't seen stars die or get born ever. We've seen them wink out, we've seen them get brighter, we've seen them get dimmer, we've seen them nova, we've seen shells erupt around them, and then there still always seems to be a point of light, aka a star inside the middle of it. So yeah, most of cosmology, and this is why when Eugene and I talked, Eugene said, I like to stay out of cosmology. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with cosmology? And it's like, well, if you get in cosmology, you become tainted, because cosmology is so jacked up on a bunch of assumptions built upon assumptions that it's being rewritten, I guess, is the good news.
Well, let's delve deeper into cosmology.
Yeah, let's.
Well, why are the people, our children, yeah, that's nice, blow that up. Why are we being taught this nonsense? Now, with the advent of radio telescopes and other high-resolution telescopes like Hubble, what we're finding is that there's no need for dark matter or antimatter. And what we've been missing is the actual matter, which is in dust. And you're going up into the pixel range here. They're able to, these so-called cosmologists are telling us that objects like you're blowing up here are black holes, sucking in other black holes with antimatter. And there's the donut. Hello? What in God's name is going on in their whole mindset and in the paradigm that they're setting for future people studying this topic?
Are you actually asking me, or is that a rhetorical question? Because I like that better as a rhetorical question because I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's out there. And I think part of what's going on here is that there is a
Let's
massive
talk about the donut. Let's
there's
talk
a
about the donut hole.
the thing about this is that there's a if you looked if you looked straight into this thing, it would just look very bright. And like there is certainly some sort of a tube shaped structure here, like most assuredly. But as far as that being a black hole, I can tell you this. I can tell you this, Diamond, with 100% surety. You see this? That's a huge radio jet. It's probably something like tens of millions of light years in length total. That is a massive radio source at its origin. So when you zoom all the way in on that and you see this donut-shaped thing that people call a black hole, the core of galaxy M87, it's certainly a radio source. Um, does
Now
ma-
look,
does mass reach
because
an
what?
infinite does mass reach an infinite
Listen,
amount in there, or
listen how stupid this is. This is how stupid this is. A black hole is something that no mass or energy can escape from, yet there's a massive jet shooting out of it. So they had to recapitulate their original hypothesis that nothing can escape from a black hole except this black hole, which is now jetting out trillions of tons of matter for tens of light years in a perpendicular position to the donut. What?
well, the jet doesn't really disprove black hole theory because there's still we're saying so you can see here what the scale is of how far they've zoomed in on this. Look, that's Neptune's orbit right there. That's Neptune's orbit. So
Oh, look,
the
this
the theory.
donut, I think, is less than 65 actual pixels.
Well, I mean, you can see the size of the heliosphere here. That this would be the heliosphere because Voyager 1 and 2 at that same time were just leaving or Voyager 2 was just leaving the heliosphere. So, that gives you some indication. I mean, in the what you would call classical astronomy.
Gigantic. So, yeah. So the donut you're looking at here is outside of the realm of Voyager 1 and 2 that have left our heliosphere on our solar system. And you've overlaid the equivalent, correct?
Yeah, well, I didn't do that. That's just part of the video. But there should be a point in here somewhere that you would call the Schwarzschild radius, where the event horizon edge is, where if you cross over, that light does not escape, and yada yada yada. But we don't really see that, and I'm not going to talk lensing or anything like that. But the fact that it looks much brighter here and here could be lensing. I'm not going to put it in GIMP and take ridiculous images of it and flip them around upside down and look at lensed images of other lensed images and clutch my pearls and cry about how I don't want to talk to anybody anymore. But in any case, the jet to me is more interesting because when you come out here, so this part here, this part of the zoom in, right here, when you see the
Well, look,
when you
I
see the
feel
blue.
like I feel like I'm in the Mandelbrot set right now, and you're bringing me in.
So if you see this image here, this blue part, this like big halo around this area, that's the Chandra X-ray
Yeah.
data, and that's going to be very precise. So that unlike the radio data, which is much lower resolution, the Chandra X-ray data really is very precise. And there definitely is a coherent jet there. So you could argue about the resolution of the
Well,
very most zoomed in
well,
part,
stop,
as
stop,
Robitaille
stop,
would.
stop there, stop there. Go back to the blue with the jet. And so, what my interpretation of that is that in the center there, where the energy is coming from, and we're looking down the jet there, which is obviously to the, let's say it's to the southeast
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Southeast, that's
or
fine.
at the yeah, it's
Southeast,
at the
southwest.
6 o'clock position.
Yeah,
Um,
you're viewing it from
but
here.
the blue halo is indicative of outburst or coronal mass ejection or a proton event or a solar proton event or a supernova or a massive nova. So that blue area, the cloud, was caused by an outburst. Do you agree, or is that an energetic field that is simply emanating from that central source?
The blue portion of this is the Chandra X-ray Observatory portion, I believe. That's just X-ray
Yeah,
emissions. It's X-ray emissions. So um, I think the main point here is that you see this cloud of X-rays. That's just an indication that there are a bunch of active stars out there, maybe very bright stars, but it just means that
you
there's
don't think
X-rays.
that's emanating from the central glow?
Um, it's probably associated with that galaxy, but
Yeah,
the main feature here that I think is really important that sort of doesn't look electric
the fake
is when you
the
start
fake
to
black hole.
when you start to look at this jet, and I cite this over and over again. This is probably like the solar wind. The sun has a coronal hole. Let me go to OBS for a second. So if you look at the sun, oh, that's the wrong thing. So if you look at the sun, let me get out of the way. The sun looks like that if you look at it from the pole, and there's
Yeah,
an enduring coronal hole there that's blasting a proton beam toward you, similar to the jet coming out of M87 there. Um, Let me get rid of that.
but look,
And and
there's
so
a perturbation, and the jet looks like it's shooting out impulses.
yeah,
See the stagnation on the line?
exactly. And what I would deduce is probably happening here is that you've got this area right here has a little more protons than this area here, and we've probably got like an electron
Yeah,
stream in here. Because when you look at solar wind out of a coronal hole, this is what you'll see. You'll see a dense proton area like this, and then you'll see empty space. And there could be electrons transferring in between this the whole time, creating like a bridging effect. And while that creates a spiral like appearance to these areas, it does not make that a fundamentally electric reaction as far as with respect to how it reacts with the rest of the universe. But what it does do is it behaves like a fountain. And I think everything from the Earth to the Sun to galactic cores all behave like fountains. So while this jet's coming out like this, some of this material is going to rain back down in this direction, and it's going to have this
yeah.
toroid feel like the one that we live on. And that's kind of the way the sun appears to work and the earth appears to work. Everything seems to have these poloidal jets. So people are obsessed with toruses right now. The torus fields and torus. And when you get zoomed in, that is most assuredly a torus, because around the black hole you're going to have, or as I'd prefer to call it, a massive radio source. You are going to have this donut-shaped material that's going to be swirling around there, and this is going to be very electrical in here. This is going to be full of mostly hydrogen, most likely. And keep in mind, when you have hydrogen nuclei just float,
It's a hydrogen plasma donut.
yeah, and when you have hydrogen just floating around by itself in an ionized form in space, and most dust in space appears to be ionized enough to be considered plasma. But the point is, this area here around here is certainly um, energetic enough from the perspective of if it was here, it would react with stuff right away. So it's constantly trying to pull electrons out of wherever there are electrons available. This giant donut of hydrogen nuclei, I'm sure, wants to grab those electrons. When you look at
So why?
the perspective of the jet, what's probably happening here is you probably have electrons that are going like this, and then when this ends, they're going to head back here and form a circuit. That probably is an electrical sort of a scenario there
All right.
at
So
the
why
terminus of the
does the
jets.
circuit form? That's what the big question.
Well, I think it comes down to condensed matter stars once again, and it's because if you have a really big object that's just like the sun, it's going to have the same sort of proportional electronic availability that the sun will have. So
Right.
if the sun
We all
emits,
understand that, but why do they form there?
I have no idea.
Right.
And that's an
So
important
there
thing in
might
science,
be.
is to understand when to say I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
big problem. Assuming like it's huge hubris and arrogance to assume that we know how things formed billions of years ago. The entire environment of the universe
Well,
could have been totally different billions of years ago.
according to the EU paradigm, like strings on a pearl, could there be these resilient electrical current sheets, Berkeley currents, that are in the universe forming a neural network, and that these are the progenitors of these pinch points that cause these liquid metallic hydrogen stars or whatever they are to form at these plasma pinches, where the mainstream misappropriates them as black holes when they're just extreme radio sources that are Z pinches in a current that are creating extreme amounts of electromagnetic force and electricity at that point, which also is emanating through the plasma wind stream, like you've suggested, like our star does, all of the elements that ever existed ever. And that would basically explain the universe.
Um, a lot of that electrical stuff might be happening on the surface of the stars, but none of that stuff explains the magnetic fields, for instance. So the magnetic fields are a huge deal. Like a lot of the electric universe stuff really doesn't understand the way
What if the
magnetism.
what if the electrical fields are residual because of billions of years of these pinches in the electrical circuits? We're just looking at the electrical fields that are local because they have to be there or else none of this would be held together.
Um, yeah, I you need condensed matter to have these very powerful magnets. So I spoke to a guy
Mm-hmm.
who alleges that he's a physics teacher quite many months ago, and I asked him about synchrotron radiation associated with galactic cores, and I said, "Don't you need more than electrons to create synchrotron radiation?" And he thought about it, and he said, "No," and that's when I knew he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Because if you can create synchrotron radiation in a laboratory without condensed matter, just with electrons just floating
You're
around in plasma, that's not a thing. So
you
the electron
so
avail
you get the Nobel Prize.
the and it's like with sapphire also. You know, I cite largely the same concerns that Eugene Bagashov has with sapphire. The problem is they did not create a star in a jar. They created a little tiny portion of the corona in a jar, which is good because if they're proving that there's another tool in the cosmic toolbox, which is the transmutation of heavy elements in the atmospheres of stars, guess what? That doesn't prove electric universe and that doesn't debunk Robitaille. That debunks electric universe and it proves Robitaille correct. Because if
Right.
all you need to make a star is a bunch of hydrogen that simply coalesces gravitationally or through polarization or through ionization pathways or through whatever, perhaps all stars are first generation stars. And the entire idea about the HR diagram, the nuclear dynamo fusion model of the sun is completely incorrect, which means all of the calculations, which are based on the diameter of other stars and their luminosity, and sometimes their variability, to calculate things like their mass and their life cycle and all of this stuff, is while the measurements of the stars isn't completely irrelevant, the ideas about how their life cycle evolves and stuff like that just make no sense. So we've never seen a star born or die. No matter what anybody tells you, we see stars wink out with no nova. We see stars not wink out with a supernova. We see stars get dimmer,
Yeah.
brighter, and all this stuff. And there are too many assumptions based on ideas
So
long
and
disproven from the 1800s.
let let's just bring it down to the most recent data coming from Betelgeuse, however you want to say it. The assumption was that Betelgeuse was dimming because it was about the nova, and then the subsequent ideas coming out in the recent weeks are that The dimming was post nova, that we already saw the nova, and it was so insignificant
Yeah.
that our assumptions were wrong.
And the dimming could have
what
been the nova.
The dimming is the nova.
Probably, yeah. Exactly. And this is
Yeah,
what we see on the
because
sun. Because what
the energy was pushed out into the universe, and what we're looking at is the remnant of the diminished star.
Yeah, and it's all of this
Yeah.
all of this falls into appropriate theories of condensed matter stars. It doesn't support stars being fundamentally electric or forming through some sort of electric interaction. I mean, personally, I think that once you get inside of uh, the photosphere, the part that looks dark when you see a sunspot, once you get inside of there, you've got layers of lattice liquid metallic hydrogen. But inside of there, once it gets enough pressure farther into the core of the sun, there's probably some kind of like a solid state hydrogen, which is very theoretical. And indeed, the diamond anvil actually is part of the title of these videos. So, I came up with this title because diamond anvils are one of the only ways that we're able to make liquid metallic hydrogen in a lab. There was a guy from, I don't want to quote which university it was, but there was a guy who thought he had some inside of a sealed up diamond anvil that was all airtight, magnetically sealed or whatever. He thought he had some in there, and then later he found out that he didn't have any, because the thing is, the stuff is so reactive, it wants to give up its electrons, so it's very hard to, if you have elements around liquid metallic hydrogen, it's going to react with them. And listen, my brain hurt very, very badly when I heard Robitaille saying that the source of the activity on the surface of the sun is because of chemical reactions and electron availability within those liquid metallic hydrogen layers. It also explains the magnetism and basically most of the solar behavior, if not all, that we see, and certainly a lot better than most of the classical cosmology. So
let's this is getting boring, and let me interject into here.
Okay.
So Bob Lazar claimed in 1991 that element 115 was available in the universe, stable on some stars. Just that in our solar system,
it might
element
be.
115 was unstable.
It could be.
So in subsequent decades, we've determined, as of 2018, that we can create element 115, which would power the quote unquote spaceships that Bob Lazar claims he worked on. The only problem is it's so reactive that the gamma radiation would kill you in like a millisecond. So we could power a spaceship with element 115, but the reactor is so deadly that anyone inside would die within moments. But Bob claimed back in 91 that his version of element 115, which he stole a portion of, was stable, and it came from another part of the universe. Is it possible in your studies, Daniel, that there could be a periodic table of the elements that are similar to our planet, but are slightly different, that would allow these higher end radionucleotides to be more stable and not emit gamma radiation? And why would that be so?
I have no idea. You could have different numbers of neutrons. Okay. I've never even considered such an idea. It's interesting.
Well, I think it has to do with some kind of gravitational packing, because what I've learned in my studies as a geologist and mineralogist is that you can, as you add temperature and pressure to a crystal lattice, it reforms into a new geometry.
Yeah.
So there could be a potential temperature and pressure that is not typical in our solar system, where this element could form, and where it could form under a higher pressure in a different format. And where we can prove this is simply from carbon. Okay, we have carbon 14, we have carbon 16, 24, 124 million, and what you get is from graphite to diamond, and that's the spectrum. So you can go from something that's as smooth as graphite that's used as a lubricant to something as hard as diamond that can bore through mountains. And that is the same element, carbon, which is also charcoal. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, how dynamic is the universe?
Well,
Completely dynamic.
I think you're starting to get into the realm of emission spectra now, and to get a
Yeah.
continuous light spectra like we see out of the sun, and I don't want to pound on the table all day and say Robitaille, 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 but he's going to tell you that to get that kind of emission spectra, it needs to come out of a thing like graphite, soot, liquid metallic hydrogen is theorized to emit that way, but it has to be a metal. If the sun is made out of a gaseous plasma, especially through and through, if it's made out of a gaseous plasma, it is not going to emit the visible light spectrum that you see on Earth. That white light that you see coming out of the sun can't come out of a gaseous plasma. There's no way to argue with emission spectra. So when you get to the most basic physics of things, the guys that are looking through a radio telescope are looking at the exact same thing that Robitaille is looking at when he sets the world record for MRI resolution, exposing his own brain to an MRI that his colleagues told him would have killed him.
Yeah. So why are we looking at 171 angstroms? What does that mean?
That's a bunch of ionized iron. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
It's very good at showing the magnetic field looping. So when you see a sunspot, right, the 171 is really good. Also the 131. And I don't know all the emission spectra by heart or anything. This one is
no.
This one is also ionized iron.
We're trying to show the people watching that each of these spectra that we're looking at are ion specific to the periodic table.
Correct. And there you can see those lovely sunspots setting there in the west.
Yeah.
It's a great time to be viewing it right now on the western limb there. You got 2762s just setting, and then 2760s just behind it. Even though I think they're both 2762 is probably still a sunspot, but 2760 has decayed to plage, which means a sandy beach.
And they're both on Cycle 24 platforms in their position.
This
so
one.
Neither of these are.
This one is 25.
So.
That one's 25. This one's 24.
Yes.
Yeah, 2762 is Cycle 25. But 2760 is 24. And it looks like we have some new activity actually right down here. So I'm going to have to cover that soon. And speaking of which, I got to go soon because daily space weather and, administering the food chain safety and all that stuff.
Amazing. 47 minutes in. Let's rehash the event, smashomash.com. Go check it out. Professor Dave explains nothing, and we're going to get to that. Why this guy has 1 million subscribers is anyone's guess. Because, first of all, I did a little history on this guy. He's not a professor. He has an undergraduate degree. He teaches high school. And that's why this many people follow him. Because the majority of you are sheep. And they're all going, to Professor Dave. You want the real information, come over to smAsho, where he'll smash it right up your... And you can check him out on YouTube, where he barely has any subscribers. Look at that. Oh my God, 1.51K? I'd be embarrassed. Let's get him to 2,000 tonight and end his play. And maybe he'll make $12 a month off of your views. Who knows? smAsh, you got anything else to say?
Yes, I
do. He's taking a piss. Professor Dave explains nothing.
Yeah, you caught me.
Will explain
You caught me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you caught me, man. I had to take a nature break there. But no, nothing else to say except watch Diamond Oppenheimer Ranch Project's latest videos. So, check it out. Hey, congratulations on 60,000 subs. I think when I started watching you. And by the way, I was referred to you from Minds.com. I don't know if you knew that. I know you said you weren't getting very much traction over there, but the person who shared your first video that I ever saw was on Minds.com. I think it was in maybe February 2018, something like that. Yeah, so...
Macaroni.
Nice videos about the bees, by the way. We actually were filming bees yesterday once again, and frankly, the weird psychic connection that you've established with us is freaking me out. But cheers and thanks. It's a delight.
Let's explain it to the people listening. If you are walking with God, this is a false paradigm. You are actually walking with the universe. And this terminology means that when you come to a decision in your life and you have to make a decision left or right, you sit in the moment and you go with your gut. You don't go with any other false information you've ever been fed from humanity. If they're telling you to run, run like the wind. If they're telling you to stay and you're uncomfortable, stay and stick. Because there's a reason why that gut mechanism is in there. And it's because you're being fed from a circuit in the universe. Tesla knew this. All of his information came from a secret source. He would sit in a chair and in an electrical environment, and he would just accept the information. He didn't know what it meant, but what it meant ultimately was his demise. Do you want to live free, or do you want to freely live? It's your choice. And we have hard decisions to make coming up now. It's always a pleasure talking to you, smAsh. Do you have any final words?
No, man. Just thanks a lot, and look for more delightful content coming soon. We're looking to switch things up. We've got new playlists on the channel and stuff. Check out our links. Check out our forum, smashamash.com/forum. Lots of good information over there, and feel free to log in and contribute. We're always interested. The information will be vetted, but you're basically free. Don't make an ass of yourself, because we probably won't censor you unless it's something illegal.
Yeah, we block everyone, so kudos to you for not blocking everyone. smashamash.com, smAsho on YouTube. All links will be below. Please subscribe to this guy. I used to think he was a schmuck, and now I know he's a schmuck with answers, and that's all that matters. So welcome to the Neo Resistance. smAsh, have a great night, and nanu nanu.
Yeah, you too, man. Talk to you soon. Nanu nanu.
Peace.
Live long and prosper.